Well, good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining us for this Christmas celebration. And I wanted to begin by saying a big thank you to the Christian Embassy for over 40 years serving here in our nation's capital and being in a light in an environment that can sometimes be quite dark. Well, as Annette and I reflect back on a journey that began nearly 4 decades ago, we are deeply aware of how richly blessed we have been by the experiences that shaped us, by the people who traveled alongside us, and by the grace of God that lit the way forward even when the path seemed uncertain. When I first entered public life, I did not fully grasp the cost of this journey, nor could I have imagined its joys. I simply knew I was called, not just to politics or public leadership, but to serve with integrity and purpose grounded in my Christian faith, to model the kind of servant leadership that Jesus himself exemplified, a leadership that listens first, seeks the good of others, and resists the temptation to place self above service. The Apostle Paul once wrote, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves." So in our world, where ambition often gets mistaken for leadership, that is a radical concept. And yet it became the foundation of my own approach to public service. But my passion for public life didn't spring up 40 years ago. It actually began even earlier, at age 9. It was a November evening in 1964 when my dad let me stay up late. It was a school night. And we watched the US presidential election returns on our rented black and white TV. And as the outcome became clearer and the announcers shared their opinions, my father explained that what I was watching was history unfold, citizens freely choosing the future of their nation. He spoke of the calling of public service in words simple enough for a child to grasp, and yet profound enough to shape the way I would see the world for the rest of my life. And that night, a seed was planted in my heart. So, friends, never underestimate the power of mentorship. A child watching, a conversation shared, and a seed planted made the world of a difference in my life.
When I met Ed, political dreams were not exactly on my radar. He was a first-year law student, bright, musical, very earnest, from a very loud, joyful family. 8 kids, where laughter and piano scales and soccer balls all seemed to coexist in perfect harmony. And the family orchestra would perform violins, cellos, recorders, piano, and the next day they'd be out playing road hockey or debating the news of the day around the dinner table. So when Ed proposed to me, it was unforgettable. I can't promise you health or wealth, but I can promise you adventure. How romantic. Unfortunately, I forgot to ask him to explain his definition of the word adventure. Soon after we were married, we left our familiar Vancouver roots and moved to the modest farming town of Abbotsford, where Ed, with a brave heart and overabundance of optimism, launched a law practice in the middle of a recession. And we bought our first small home and welcomed our first daughter, all within months. Years later, I would say, "Oh yeah, so this is what you meant by adventure." We built our life around faith and family and purpose. 4 daughters in 6 years, a home full of instruments, lots of books, muddy boots, never-ending laundry, and those years were weren't just busy, they were rich. Our mothers, both of our mothers, had modeled homemaking not as housekeeping, but in a sense of cultivating a life-giving environment with a healthy, loving family at its core. And this has to be done with a plan and a purpose. The legacy of our parents loomed large. From extreme poverty, 3 of them came to Canada as war refugees and grew to love our country and its freedoms. I've often joked that Ed's mother, no kidding, Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady, and mine was Martha Stewart, although mine didn't end up in jail. Each with formidable talents in their own areas of gifting, and add to that a foundation of faith and sacrificial devotion, they raised their kids with loving discipline and a commitment to excellence. I love this scripture, I've always loved it. King Solomon wrote, "By wisdom a house is built, by understanding it is established, by knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches." So Ed and I built our family in our growing town, and the years flew by as election to local school board and city council began to shape our public service adventure. Music performances, father-daughter wilderness hikes, and canoeing trips throughout BC built a strong bond. We were busy. Then I heard a word that my husband had kept hidden in his heart for many years, and the word was Ottawa.
When I eventually arrived in Parliament after 14 years of local politics, I quickly discovered how intoxicating Ottawa can be. The allure of influence, the relentless pace, endless cocktail parties, young staffers, lobbyists, media, power brokers. You know, there's a steady hum of ambition in Ottawa, and some of it is good, but some of it not so good. In that environment, you need an anchor. Mine was my faith, a small circle of parliamentary friends who shared it. Every week, we would quietly meet for a prayer, Bible study, and we reminded each other of what truly mattered. Not popularity, not prestige, but faithfulness. And some of those friends are with us tonight, and I am forever grateful to them.
I'll never forget my first walk up to Parliament Hill, my first time ever in Ottawa, actually, with Ed after the 2006 election. Snow was crunching underfoot, the Peace Tower rising above us, and the Centennial flame flickering in the cold. I kept thinking, Lord, how on earth did we get here? Ottawa was a new world for us, exciting and meaningful, but also unpredictable and demanding. Life for a political spouse is a study in contrasts, privilege and pressure, pride and loneliness, purpose and sacrifice. The schedule, that unforgiving master, bends for no birthday or graduation or wedding anniversary. So Sunday, once a sacred day for family, becomes simply another day on the political calendar. And yet, amid those challenges, a quiet network of friendships, trusted, genuine, faith-filled, became a lifeline. And some of you ladies are here tonight. Just blesses my heart. Also a local life group back home. 6 couples. They prayed us through every election, every disappointment, every turning point. And their steadfast support was and remains one of the greatest gifts on this journey.
Now, some of you may be wondering, what is politics really like? And my answer is this. At its core, it's a team sport. Certainly in Western democracies, it's a team sport, a very human one. It's full of beauty and brokenness. It reflects the best and worst of our human nature. Politics can be noble, but it's also very messy. Too often the political battlefield resembles a blood sport, where ambition tramples principle, where marriages falter, and where identity becomes inseparable from political office. When I arrived in Ottawa, I quickly discovered an environment in which people were scrambling up the ladder of ambition, sometimes stepping on others on their way up to the top. For politicians to be successful, and this is important to remember, in our system of democracy, 4 parties to be successful and to be in a position to influence and govern. That system of government calls for accommodation, party discipline, and the flexibility and the willingness to work within imperfect structures. Structures that reflect and amplify our human frailties and weaknesses, which are, of course, rooted in our flawed human nature. But I want to be fair. You will also see grace, generosity, compassion, courage. And that's why servant leadership matters. Influence without humility is dangerous. Leadership without character is hollow. Stepping into the political arena tests everything, your convictions, your temperament, even your health. And the longer I served, the more I understood that true servant leadership means taking the spotlight off yourself and refocusing it on the people that you seek to serve and lead. To be an effective team leader, you first need to be a great team player. So becoming Minister of International Trade in 2011 brought with it both extraordinary opportunity and significant cost. The pace was relentless. Global negotiations, endless travel, late-night strategy sessions, navigating complex relationships, and of course, long separations from home. And the work was certainly meaningful, but it also cost me my health. Eventually, my body reminded me that even meaningful work can become too much. But that season also taught me something else: gratitude, especially for Annette's quiet strength and unwavering support, a strength I too often had taken for granted.
Our 4 daughters received an education that no textbook can provide. They watched their dad navigate criticism, disappointment, leadership, and purpose, not perfectly, but faithfully. And they learned from real life what it means to be steadfast. For us, music became our family's refuge. Gospel songs around the piano, lots of choir concerts, recording studios, performances. These were the moments of bonding and joy. And today, our daughters are all musicians, educators, and devoted mothers. And yes, we have 15 rambunctious grandchildren, ages 1 through 12. We just heard that same age group from somebody here. Yes. And it means our house is still very noisy, fun-filled, and very chaotic. I should also add that my morning coffee times with Ed, as irregular as it may have been due to his schedule at times, still remain a time of connection and of grounding.
So it's election night 2006. We Conservatives had just won power after 13 years of Liberal government. And obviously we were in a celebratory mood. In the middle of that celebration, an elderly man came up to me, gently poked me in the chest, and he said, "Mr. Fast, now that you've been elected to represent us in Parliament, I hope you're not going there to shove religion down people's throats." And you can imagine, I was taken aback at first. But I paused, and then after a moment replied, "Sir, I want to assure you, I have no intention of going to Ottawa to shove religion down people's throats. But may I ask you, which of my faith values do you want me to leave behind? Is it the command to love and to love my neighbor as myself? Is it justice, compassion, forgiveness, patience, grace? What about goodness and mercy? And I think he did get the point. Charles Colson once said, and wisely observed, the kingdom of God will not arrive on Air Force One. Yeah, now think about it. And what he meant was that seizing the tools of political power cannot and will not change people's hearts. Only God can do that. But those same tools can create the conditions under which human dignity flourishes and is protected, and in which justice is pursued. And that calls for leaders of humility, grace, and forbearance who refuse to be defined by the power they wield. Those of us who live in free democracies like ours, we are the beneficiaries of both a gift and a sacred trust. Remember, democracy is not the norm in most of the world. To squander that right to engage in the public square and to elect our leaders by withdrawing from public life would be an abdication of love for our neighbor. Respectful engagement calls for people of faith and character to enter the public square with integrity and with the courage and confidence to speak truth to power, even when it may be unpopular to do so.
As I look back on the last 20 years, I can see how God was able to use two very ordinary people from Abbotsford to serve our country. It was truly the honor of a lifetime. And I'm thankful for the way the challenges of public life enriched our marriage and grew friendships that were forged in the fires of election battles and parliamentary debate. I'm grateful for our parents and the many mentors that prayed for our nation and for our family. They gave us broad shoulders to stand on. So if you're here tonight and your story begins with brokenness or blessing, you can be the one that God can use to grow a new family tree. The Christian gospel is about good news and new life. It's about our Creator speaking a perfect world into existence, creating us in His image, and those image bearers rebelling against God, resulting in a broken world. It's about a loving God taking on human form in the person of Jesus to rescue His creation and atone for our rebellion. And by His death on the cross, Jesus took our place, my place. And by His resurrection, He has invited us to a restored relationship, an eternal one with Him. And that is the true story of Christmas.
As I reflect on a lifetime spent at the intersection of faith and public life, I'm often asked whether a follower of Jesus can ever really operate with integrity on the political battlefield, or whether a Christian should even engage in public life. But that question of how faith should inform our engagement with the secular world, including politics, that question is as old as the Bible itself. Isaiah urges us, "Come, let us reason together," which is an invitation not only to forgiveness, but also to dialogue in the marketplace of ideas. The prophet Micah said, what God really requires of us is to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. And those principles should guide us as citizens and as leaders who profess to follow Christ. Now, we have many giants of the faith to emulate. For example, Joseph, became an indispensable advisor to King Pharaoh of Egypt. Daniel counseled Babylonian kings. Queen Esther risked her life in the court of Xerxes, successfully intervening on behalf of the Jewish people who faced a genocide. But none of these kings that I mentioned worshiped the God of Joseph or Daniel or Esther, and yet all of them benefited from the wisdom and courage of God's people. These biblical figures modeled faithful engagement within imperfect, even hostile political systems. I'm also reminded of the Apostle Paul, who in Athens, surrounded by idols and skeptics, did not retreat. Instead, he engaged the philosophers of Greece on their own terms, quoting their poets, acknowledging their spiritual hunger, and then pointing them to the unknown God, made known in Jesus. Paul demonstrated how people of faith can enter the public square respectfully, intelligently, and boldly, building bridges of understanding without compromising truth or their integrity. So now, as both Annette and I step away from public life, we do so with immense gratitude. We haven't been perfect, but we've sought to be faithful. Faithful to God, faithful to our family, and faithful to our nation.
To anyone here that is considering public service, we would say, do not let fear hold you back. The cost is real. The distance, the loneliness, the fatigue, the criticism, perhaps disappointment, or even sadder, friendly fire. But the privilege of shaping policy, influencing lives, and serving the country that you love is profound. And to you spouses, there is a lot here in the room. All of you who are spouses of those that serve, know that your faithfulness and your encouragement and your commitment are not invisible to God. He knows your heart, and He will reward your sacrifice. May God bless you and your families.
So let me close with two challenges. To those who have never had the opportunity to consider faith in Jesus as the answer to life's deepest questions, questions such as, who is Jesus? Why does He matter? Why am I here? And where am I going? Or, does God really know me, care for me, and love me? I can assure you, Jesus wants to answer those questions and give you hope for the future. He invites you to have a personal relationship with Him, the living God. So Annette and I want to encourage each of you to discover the real, the historical Jesus, the author and fulfillment of the Christmas story that we're celebrating tonight. And to those of you who are already followers of Christ and engaged in the marketplace of ideas, there are many of you here today, or you may be someone that is considering such a role. Let us encourage you. Faith and public life will always be in tension with each other. But we are not called to retreat or to win every battle, but to remain faithful to God, to our conscience, and to the people we serve. As Wilberforce, Luther, Bonhoeffer, and so many other heroes of the faith have demonstrated throughout the centuries, courage and character can shape history. So, to all of you, Merry Christmas.